They say curiosity ruins marriages faster than lies ever could, but sometimes it's curiosity that saves you from a lifetime of pretending. That morning the sun hit the windshield just right, and something metallic flashed above the visor. I reached up thinking it was a coin or maybe one of my cufflinks, but it wasn't. It was a man's watch, heavy, expensive, and definitely not mine. For a moment my heartbeat stuttered. My wife's perfume still lingered inside the car, jasmine and vanilla, but this watch smelled of something else. A faint trace of cologne, sharp, masculine, foreign. I turned it over in my hand. The leather strap was still warm from sunlight. On the back, scratched faintly, were 3 engraved letters, Art MC. C. I didn't know anyone by those initials, but she did. My first instinct was to call her, to ask calmly at first, then maybe louder, but anger has a way of feeding itself. Once you let it in, it grows until there's no space left for truth. So instead, I just sat there, staring at that watch like it was ticking away what was left of my marriage. I wiped the dust off the dial. The glass was cracked on the edge like it had been dropped. Maybe in this car, maybe in her hands. I should have shouted. I should have thrown it at the wall, demanded an answer. But I didn't. Because deep down, I didn't want an answer yet. I wanted proof. That night, she came home late. Said there was traffic on the bridge, her voice too casual, her keys too loud when they hit the counter. I watched her make dinner, smile, ask me about my day. The picture of normal, but I couldn't stop seeing that watch glinting under the morning sun. When she went to bed, I stayed up. I took the watch out again and studied it under the kitchen light, turning it slowly, tracing the engraved initials, memorizing the weight. Then I cleaned it, polished it until it looked untouched, wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, and then I did something even I couldn't explain. I slipped it into a small brown box, wrote an address, and sealed it. Not to her office, not to the man I thought it might belong to, but to her father. The next morning, I stood in line at the post office, holding that box like it was something sacred. When I handed it to the clerk, she smiled and said, "Anything fragile inside?" I looked at her and nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly, "something very fragile." As the package disappeared behind the counter, a strange calm settled over me. I didn't know what kind of storm I had just mailed, but I knew it would reach the right hands. I walked out into the sunlight, hands empty, heart heavier than I'd admit. The watch was gone, but its ticking hadn't stopped. It was still counting down, I just didn't know to what yet. And that was the moment I realized. Curiosity isn't just dangerous, it's contagious, because once you start looking for the truth, it starts looking back. They say once you mail something, you can't take it back. But as I walked out of that post office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just mailed a package. I'd mailed a fuse. For the next 2 days I waited, not for my wife to slip, but for her father to react. Every sound from my phone made my pulse jump. A message, a voicemail, a name flashing across the screen, nothing. Just silence, the kind that feels too heavy to be normal. I started noticing everything. The way she hummed while cooking, the way she avoided eye contact when her phone buzzed at dinner, the way she laughed just a little too hard at nothing. Every move she made felt like a scene she was rehearsing for someone else. On the third morning, a thought hit me. What if he never opened it? What if the watch just sat there, buried under bills and newspapers, my message lost in the noise? So I checked the tracking number, delivered, signed for by R. Collins, her father. That night she came home early. Too early, her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. She said nothing about the package, nothing about her day. Just poured herself a drink and sat beside me on the couch, quiet, distant. I didn't ask. I just watched the flicker of the TV light across her face, trying to read what the silence meant. Later, when she went to bed, I poured my own drink and pulled out an old notebook, something I hadn't used in years. I started writing dates, times, places, every little inconsistency I'd noticed in the past month. Because if the watch had started something, I was going to finish it. 2 days later, her father called. His voice was steady, but I could hear something behind it, tension, like he was forcing every word through his teeth. He didn't ask how I was, didn't even greet me properly. He just said, "Oh, where did you find it?" I didn't answer. I wanted to hear how much he already knew. He repeated the question slower this time. And then before I could speak, he added quietly, "You shouldn't have sent it." Click. He hung up. My hand froze around the phone. I sat there, listening to the dial tone fade, realizing something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was bigger, older, because the way he said it, it didn't sound like guilt for his daughter's sake. It sounded like fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice in my head over and over. "You shouldn't have sent it." So I did what curiosity always makes a man do. I went back to the scene of the crime, the car. I searched it again, every corner, every compartment, every hidden pocket, and tucked under the driver's mat, I found something I'd missed before, a small, torn envelope. smeared with oil, no name, just a faint postal seal. Inside was a single receipt, a jewelry repair shop 2 towns over, the date, kind of beef, we have profet owns the watch. And on the receipt, the same initials, RDMC. That's when I knew the watch wasn't just evidence of betrayal. Proud of bet. It was a message someone had already tried to hide, and I just sent it straight to the one man who didn't want it found. I leaned back in the driver's seat, the night pressing in around me. The air smelled like gasoline and rain. The fuse I'd mailed wasn't burning quietly anymore. It was moving fast, and whatever explosion was coming, I had a feeling it wouldn't stop at my marriage. They say trouble doesn't start with a bang. It starts with ripples, small, quiet disturbances that spread until they reach every corner of your life. The morning after her father's call, something in the air shifted. My wife moved differently, quieter. Her footsteps softer, her phone never leaving her hand. She smiled less, talked less, and when she looked at me, it wasn't with guilt, it was with calculation. 3 days passed before I saw her father again. He showed up at our house unannounced, early morning, suit pressed, face tight with forced politeness. He brought donuts like this was some family breakfast, not a silent interrogation. When our eyes met, his smile faltered for just a second, just long enough for me to know that the watch had reached the right hands. We all sat at the table, pretending to eat. He asked about work, the weather, meaningless things, but his voice carried tension, like every word was an effort to hold something back. Then he said it casual, almost too casual. You've always been good at fixing things, haven't you, son? I nodded, matching his calm. I try. He sipped his coffee, eyes never leaving mine. Sometimes, though, he continued, things are better left broken. My wife's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She didn't look at him, didn't look at me either, just stared down at her plate motionless. That's when I knew he wasn't warning me, he was warning her. After he left, the silence between us stretched thin. She stayed in the kitchen, cleaning plates that were already spotless. Her hands trembled. When I asked if everything was okay, she said, it's just family stuff, right? That night I went for a drive, the kind where you don't have a destination, just questions gnawing at your brain. I ended up parked outside a dark suburban house, her father's place. The lights were on. Through the window, I could see him pacing, talking on the phone, his gestures sharp, angry. I recorded the time. The call lasted 13 minutes. He slammed the receiver down so hard the window pane shook. When he turned off the lights, I caught a glimpse of something on his desk, a small brown box, still half open. The one I had mailed. Inside, the watch glinted under the lamp's fading glow, and next to it, a photograph. I couldn't see it clearly, but I recognized the frame. It was the same picture that used to sit on our mantle, my wife at a charity event last year. Only this one had someone else in it, a man, same initials, Art MC. The next morning I confronted her again, not with anger, but with curiosity sharpened into steel. I told her I'd seen the picture. For a second she froze, then she laughed, short, nervous fake. You're imagining things, she said, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. That's when I realized she wasn't lying to protect herself, she was lying to protect him, her father. Because whatever connected that watch, those initials, and that picture, it wasn't about love or betrayal or dangerous. It was about something far more dangerous. I went to bed that night knowing one thing for certain. The ripples had started. And sooner or later they were going to drag us all under. They say once you start digging for the truth, you better be ready for what you find, because the dirt doesn't just come off your hands. After the breakfast with her father, I stopped pretending. The smiles, the small talk, the dinners, all of it became noise. My mind turned into a filing cabinet, every detail stored, cross-checked, replayed. I started with the simple things. Receipts, calls, bank alerts, the kind of evidence that hides in plain sight when you trust someone too much. Her phone bills showed late-night numbers I didn't recognize. Her car's mileage didn't match her office commute. And her story about that charity event, the one in the photograph, didn't line up with the foundation's own calendar. Every alibi she gave me only built a higher wall of doubt. One night while she slept, I sat in my office with the watch on the desk beside me. Its ticking was the only sound in the room. The light from my computer screen painted the walls cold blue. I searched the initials again, Art MC, trying every combination I could think of, business registries, property records, tax filings. Most led nowhere, until one did. A company name, Art M. Collins and Associates, registered 12 years ago, dissolved 7, lasted address the same street as her father's old office. I drove there the next morning. The building was half abandoned, windows boarded, letters faded. But inside the mailbox, buried under flyers and dust, was a rusted nameplate, R.M. Collins, the same initials. The same ghost. When I came home, I searched every drawer, every box, every forgotten corner of our house. That's when I found it, an old hardcover ledger tucked behind her father's books in the study. The pages were filled with numbers, signatures, and scribbles that made no sense. But inside the back cover, written faintly in pencil, was something else, a safety deposit box number. I didn't tell her, I didn't tell anyone. The next day, I went to the bank listed on the corner of the page. The clerk looked at me like I was crazy when I said I'd lost the key. But money talks, and curiosity sometimes borrows its language. Inside that box was a single envelope, aged, yellowed, but sealed tight. No documents, no jewelry, just one old cassette tape and a folded note that read, archive, before deletion. I didn't even open it there. I took it home, locked my office door, and played it on my old recorder. The sound was rough, like a phone call recorded in secret, at first just static, then a voice deep, older. Her father's. He was talking about money transfers, offshore accounts, a deal that had gone bad, and then another voice, my wife's. She wasn't begging or arguing, she was negotiating. Shoo, she said, if you want him to stay quiet, I'll handle it. My blood ran cold. Who was him? Me, the missing partner, someone else entirely? When the tape ended, I sat there staring at the wall, the room spinning slowly, the watch, the initials. The fear in her father's voice. It all connected, just not the way I thought. This wasn't about love or betrayal anymore. It was about business, money, secrets, buried under names and years. And somewhere in the middle of it all was me. I picked up the watch again, feeling its weight. It wasn't just proof anymore, it was a key, and whatever door it opened next, I knew it wouldn't be one I could close again. They say silence can protect you, but sometimes silence is just guilt wearing a disguise. 3 days after finding that cassette tape, I called her father. He didn't answer the first time, or the second, but on the third ring he picked up, his voice strained, already knowing why I was calling. I told him we needed to talk. In person, he suggested his house, I suggested mine. We settled on neutral ground. His office, the one he supposedly hadn't used in years. When I arrived, the blinds were half closed, dust floating through streaks of sunlight. The air smelled like old paper and regret. He stood behind his desk, hands clasped, trying to look calm. But his eyes gave him away. I placed the watch on the table between us. It landed with a soft, hollow thud, like the sound of a verdict being read. He stared at it for a long time, jaw tight, before finally saying, "Yo, you should have burned that." I didn't answer. I wanted him to fill the silence. He sighed, rubbed his temples, then sat down. "I don't know what you think you've found," he said. "Flockst the found in Prost and Troppers. I don't know what you think you've found," he said, "but you're playing a dangerous game." I leaned forward, my voice low. "The only game I'm playing is the one you started, you and your daughter." His expression darkened. "Careful, son, don't call me that." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ticking of the office clock filled the room, steady, relentless, matching the rhythm of my pulse. Then I reached into my pocket and placed the cassette tape beside the watch. He froze. I listened to it, I said, every word. He stared at the tape like it was something poisonous. Mike. Then he said softly, "You have no idea what that really is." Then enlighten me. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the door, as if expecting someone to walk in. If finally, he said, "It wasn't supposed to involve you. You weren't part of this. She was trying to protect you. By lying to me?" He looked up, his face lined with something that almost resembled pity. "No, by keeping you alive." That stopped me cold, alive. Before I could ask, the door creaked open. My wife stepped inside. Her voice was trembling but firm. "Dad, stop." I turned to her, searching her face for answers. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. I said, "Tell me the truth now." She's hard. "That watch," she said, "didn't belong to another man. It belonged to someone my father wanted forgotten. His old partner, Richard M. Collins." The name hit me like a slap. Art MC. Her father shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. "That's enough," but she kept going. "He disappeared years ago after a deal went bad. Dad said he died, but he didn't. He was blackmailing him." The money, the offshore accounts, it was all hush money. The watch was proof. He was still out there. I turned back to her father. "So what happened to him?" He looked away. People who dig too deep tend to stay buried." The room went still. That was as close to a confession as I was going to get. My wife whispered, "I left the watch in the car for you to find. I knew if you mailed it to him, it would force this." My throat tightened. "You used me." Her eyes glistened. "I needed you to see what kind of man he really is." For a moment, I didn't know who to hate more, the liar or the one she lied for. Her father stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and said, "Oh, you think you've uncovered the truth? You've only scratched the surface." Then he walked out, leaving the watch and tape sitting between us like two loaded guns. I looked at her. She looked back, tears breaking through the silence. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The truth hadn't set us free. It had only built a bigger cage. They say once the truth cracks open, it doesn't pour out, it bleeds slow and messy. After that day in her father's office, nothing felt real anymore. The house was quieter than it had ever been. No arguments, no explanations. Just silence, the kind that hums in the walls and watches you while you sleep. I started seeing ghosts in every reflection, every message on her phone, every call she didn't take. She tried to talk to me, tried to explain more about her father, the partner, the missing man. But I couldn't hear her. I was too busy piecing together the things she hadn't said. That night, I played the cassette again. This time, I caught something I'd missed before. A second voice in the background, faint but clear enough to recognize. It wasn't her father, it wasn't her, it was a man I'd never heard before, saying, "He cashed biches per couch. He knows too much." I paused the tape, rewound, played it again, the same line, the same dread. The next morning I went back to the ledger I'd found, the one with the bank numbers and signatures. At the bottom of one page, scrawled in a rush, was a single date, April Chi. I checked my bank account history. That was the exact day a wire transfer hit our joint account, money I'd never seen before. Someone had used my name. I drove to the bank, demanded answers. The manager checked the logs, said the deposit came from an offshore company under R.M. Collins and Associates, a ghost business. A dead man's name. When I got home, she was waiting on the porch. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. She said, "He's gone." "Who?" I asked my father. "He left town this morning." No note, no calls, just gone. Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw real fear in her. Not guilt, not shame, fear. I asked, "What aren't you telling me?" She hesitated, then whispered, "There's more money." A lot more, and if he ran, it means someone's coming for it. The words hit like cold steel. This wasn't a family secret anymore. It was a criminal one. That night, I went through the box again, the watch, the tape, the ledger. I spread everything across the table like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. Every clue pointed to the same thing. A man who was supposed to be dead, a father who wasn't clean, and a wife who was caught in the middle. And me, the idiot who thought this was about cheating. At RAM, headlights flashed through the window. A car idled across the street, engine running, lights off. Someone was watching the house. I stepped outside, pretending to take out the trash. The car didn't move, tinted windows, no plates. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You should have stopped digging." The car pulled away, slow, deliberate. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, realizing how far this had gone. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was survival. Back inside, she was waiting by the stairs, pale and shaking. I told her everything, the message, the car, the deposits. She didn't look surprised, just scared. "Finally," she said, "then it's starting? Starting?" I asked. She nodded slowly. My father wasn't the only one who wanted Collins gone. He made enemies, powerful ones, the kind that don't forgive, and now they think you have what they want. My stomach turned cold. The watch, the tape, the ledger, 3 relics of a secret I was never supposed to find. And as the wind howled through the night, I realized this wasn't a story about betrayal anymore. It was a story about erasing evidence, and I was next on the list. Morning light cut through the blinds like a blade. The house was stripped bare, drawers open, clothes scattered, phone off the hook. Only one thing sat perfectly centered on the table, the watch. I'd cleaned it so many times I could trace every curve blindfolded. But today it wasn't the watch that drew my attention, it was the faint ticking. For the first time since I'd found it, the watch was running again. That shouldn't have been possible. I'd never fixed it. When I flipped it over, something new caught my eye. The back plate, where the initials were scratched, had shifted slightly. I pried it open, and inside, folded tighter than a secret, was a thin strip of microfilm, a code, a record, a map of money that didn't exist on any books I'd ever seen. I took it to an old contact, a man who owed me favors from before life got quiet. He scanned it, frowned, and said just one thing: "Oh, this isn't a watch." The film revealed offshore accounts, hidden transfers, and one unmistakable name repeated over and over: Richard M. Collins. The same partner her father said had died 15 years ago in a boating accident, except he hadn't. The watch had been his and the death had been staged, not to escape guilt, but to bury evidence. Collins had been blackmailing his own partner, her father, and the watch was how he kept the ledger safe, locked behind time itself. The old man wasn't sentimental, he kept trophies. The watch was his victory flag until she found it. When I got home, she was waiting in the doorway, not afraid this time, not hiding, just tired. She said, "You found it, didn't you?" She said, "You found it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She walked to the table, picked up the watch, and stared at it like she was holding a heartbeat that didn't belong to her. Then she said, "He killed him, my father. He killed Collins and made it look like an accident. I found out last year I couldn't go to the police, not without evidence that wouldn't vanish. So I left the only trail you'd ever follow." Her voice didn't shake. It was calm, deliberate, the same way I'd been when I mailed the watch to her father. It hit me all at once. The placement, the perfume, the initials, everything had been a message. Not for confrontation, but for discovery. She hadn't betrayed me. She'd used my suspicion as bait. Because she knew curiosity would make me dig deeper than loyalty ever could, I asked. "So this was all planned? Every lie?" She nodded. "I needed someone clean, someone who'd look guilty enough to draw him out. You were my proof. You were the only person he'd underestimate." The words landed like ash in my mouth. I wasn't her enemy. I was her weapon. The ledger, the tape, the car that watched us, all of it was part of something bigger. And in the end, she'd won. The authorities took her father in a quiet early morning raid. No headlines. No handcuffs on camera, just disappearance, the same way he'd made others vanish. I didn't see her again for 3 months. When she finally called, her voice sounded like winter, distant, clean, almost peaceful. "He's gone," she said, "for good." I asked, "And us?" There was a pause long enough to swallow a lifetime. Then we were never us, not really. "You were the only one who could finish what I couldn't." The line went dead. That night, I opened the drawer where the watch used to be. Only the box remained, empty, but heavier somehow. I realized the truth didn't set anyone free. It just rearranged the cages. And somewhere between curiosity and revenge, between love and manipulation, I'd become something I never planned to be. A man who finally understood that justice is just another kind of betrayal. The watch ticked in my memory, steady and cold, counting down the seconds to a victory no one would ever celebrate.